June 18th, 1944. Early morning. A narrow road in Normandy. A German truck column waits at the edge of a hedgerow, engines off. Drivers sit still behind the wheels. Infantry stand nearby, helmets low, weapons slung, eyes scanning the sky more than the road ahead. Nothing is moving. Not because of Allied troops in front of them, but because of what might appear above them. You can almost feel the tension in the air. The road is intact. The bridges ahead still stand. The route is clear. Yet the column does not advance. Every man here knows why. The sky has become hostile territory. Somewhere beyond the clouds, Allied aircraft are circling unseen, unheard for the moment, but expected. The soldiers wait for the sound that now governs their lives. The distant hum of engines, the sudden whistle of a dive, the sharp crack of machine gun fire from above. Minutes pass. Still nothing. But the waiting itself is the message. This is what the Western Front has become. Movement by day is a risk. Concentration is dangerous. Speed invites attention. For German forces, the war on the ground is no longer decided only by what lies ahead or to the flanks. It is decided by what might be overhead at any moment. You can almost sense how unnatural this feels to men trained for maneuver and decisive action. Armies are meant to move. Supplies are meant to flow. Orders are meant to be carried out without hesitation. Yet now, hesitation is survival. By mid-1944, Allied air power does not always announce itself with dramatic battles in the sky. More often, it works quietly, persistently, relentlessly. Fighter bombers patrol roads. Reconnaissance aircraft map every junction and rail line. Tactical air units wait for movement, any movement, to reveal itself. The result is not constant destruction. It is constant pressure. German convoys begin to travel only at night. Even then, headlights are covered. Routes are changed repeatedly. Units break into smaller groups, moving in pieces rather than formations. Speed is replaced by caution. You can almost feel how this reshapes decision-making at every level. A divisional commander plans an attack, then delays it not because the enemy is strong, but because daylight would expose his movement. A supply officer reroutes a convoy 3 times to avoid open ground. An infantry unit waits hours for armor that never arrives, grounded not by enemy fire, but by the threat of air attack. The battlefield has expanded upward, and the balance has shifted. Allied ground forces are advancing across France, but it is the air forces that shape the rhythm of the fight, not always by destroying German units outright, but by denying them freedom. Freedom to move. Freedom to concentrate. Freedom to recover. You can almost see how this creates a quiet asymmetry. Allied columns move openly by day. Roads fill with trucks, tanks, artillery, fuel, and food. Bridges are repaired and used immediately. Air cover watches overhead, discouraging interference. German forces, by contrast, operate under a permanent shadow. Every movement must be justified. Every delay compounds the next. Time itself becomes an enemy. This is not the dramatic image of air power most people imagine. There are no sweeping dogfights here. No heroic charges through flak-filled skies. Instead, there is something more decisive. Control. Control of when and where the enemy can move. Control of what he can risk. Control of how predictable he becomes. By the summer of 1944, German movements on the Western Front are no longer hidden. They are observed, anticipated, and increasingly constrained. Routes that once offered flexibility now funnel traffic into predictable paths. Rail lines become liabilities. Open roads become traps. The sky is no longer neutral. It belongs to the Allies. And while the men on the ground may not always see the aircraft that shape their fate, they feel their presence constantly, in the pauses, in the delays, in the decisions not taken. This is the quiet turning point. Not a single battle. Not a single strike. But a condition of warfare that changes everything beneath it. As the German column finally begins to move, slowly, cautiously, eyes still fixed upward, one question hangs over the Western Front. What happens to an army when the sky itself no longer belongs to it? As daylight strengthens, German movement thins. Not because orders have changed, but because risk has. By mid-1944, German commanders on the Western Front understand a hard truth. Every movement in daylight is a signal. Every convoy, every armored column, every concentration of vehicles is an invitation. You can almost feel how this alters behavior on the ground. Columns no longer move as units. They fragment. Trucks are spaced far apart. Tanks hide under trees, camouflage netting pulled tight. Vehicles are pushed into barns, orchards, village streets, anywhere shadows offer a chance of concealment. Even then, it is not enough. Allied aircraft do not need to destroy everything they see. They only need to be present. Their constant patrols force German units to behave predictably, to move at night, to use limited routes, to slow down. Predictability is the real damage. Rail lines once used to shift divisions quickly now become liabilities. Bridges are watched closely. Marshalling yards are photographed, then photographed again. When trains move, they do so briefly, cautiously, and often too late. You can almost see how this compresses German options. Flexibility disappears. A commander may want to reinforce a threatened sector, but the only route available is already known to Allied reconnaissance. He delays, hoping conditions improve. They rarely do. On the ground, the effects compound. Units arrive late. Supplies lag behind the front. Ammunition is rationed not because it is unavailable, but because delivering it safely is uncertain. Air superiority does not need to win battles directly. It needs only to distort them. Allied forces begin to exploit this imbalance instinctively. Advances are timed with air patrols overhead. Convoys move openly, protected not by secrecy, but by dominance. Engineers repair roads and bridges in daylight, confident that enemy interference will be minimal. The contrast is stark. One side hides from the sky. The other uses it. You can almost feel how this reshapes morale. German soldiers speak less about enemy strength and more about enemy aircraft. The sound of engines overhead draws attention, even when no attack follows. The fear is not constant, but it is always possible. And possibility is enough. As German units adapt, their tempo slows further. Night movement increases, but night brings its own problems. Navigation errors multiply. Coordination suffers. Units lose contact. Orders are misunderstood or arrive too late. What air power takes away during the day, darkness struggles to return at night. This is the quiet genius of air superiority. It does not require constant violence. It requires presence, persistence, and the ability to deny the enemy freedom. By late summer, Allied commanders recognize this fully. Air power is no longer treated as a supporting arm. It is integrated into every plan. Ground advances assume air cover as a given. German reactions assume vulnerability as a certainty. The sky has imposed a rhythm on the battlefield, and that rhythm favors only one side. As German forces continue to adjust, breaking apart, hiding, delaying, one question grows more urgent with each passing day. If movement itself invites destruction, how long can an army continue to fight at all? By late summer 1944, the Western Front no longer behaves the way pre-war doctrine predicted. Battles are still fought on the ground. Infantry still advance. Tanks still clash. Artillery still shapes the immediate fight. But the outcome is being decided earlier, before contact is made. From the air, you can almost feel how this changes the texture of ground combat. Allied units move with an assumption that was never guaranteed earlier in the war. The enemy will struggle to react. German counterattacks are smaller, slower, and increasingly predictable. Not because German soldiers lack skill or resolve, but because assembling forces without detection has become nearly impossible. Every attempt to concentrate leaves traces. Tracks on roads. Movement at junctions. Heat from engines. Patterns that aerial reconnaissance notices quickly. Allied aircraft do not need to destroy the force outright. They relay information. They mark positions. They linger overhead, forcing dispersal. The counterattack arrives late, weakened, and often fragmented. You can almost see how this strips German commanders of initiative. They are forced into a reactive posture responding to Allied moves rather than shaping events themselves. On the Allied side, the effect is cumulative. Ground units begin to advance with greater confidence. Not recklessness, but assurance. They know that large enemy movements are unlikely to surprise them. Air reconnaissance becomes as important as patrols. Commanders study aerial photographs before moving. Roads are selected based on enemy exposure rather than speed alone. Artillery plans integrate expected enemy delays caused by air pressure. The battlefield has become transparent, unevenly so. German forces operate inside a narrowing envelope of possibility. They still fight effectively in close terrain, in villages, in forests. But beyond these pockets, their freedom disappears. You can almost feel how this reshapes defensive planning. Positions are chosen not just for fields of fire, but for overhead cover. Units dig in near trees, embankments, buildings, anything that breaks visibility from above. Defense becomes vertical as well as horizontal. This adaptation slows the Allies in places, but it cannot reverse the larger pattern. Air superiority ensures that every German adjustment is temporary, localized, and ultimately exposed. Even success creates problems. A successful defense draws attention. Reinforcements sent to exploit it must travel. Travel creates exposure. The cycle repeats. Allied ground commanders begin to expect this. They pressure German lines, knowing that even if resistance stiffens, the enemy's ability to exploit success is limited. Time favors the side that controls the air. You can almost sense how subtle this is. There are no single moments where air power alone breaks the front. Instead, it shapes 1,000 small decisions. When to move, where to move, whether to move at all. Those decisions accumulate. German units arrive late to critical points. Allied units arrive on time. German artillery redeploys slowly. Allied artillery repositions freely. German reserves exist on paper, but cannot be brought forward quickly enough to matter. Air superiority does not destroy German forces outright. It empties their options. And as options disappear, outcomes become inevitable. By early autumn, the Western Front reflects this imbalance clearly. Allied advances are not always fast, but they are steady. German resistance is not always weak, but it is constrained. The sky has rewritten the rules of ground combat. What once depended on maneuver and surprise now depends on exposure and delay. The side that can see, predict, and restrict movement holds the advantage often before the first shot is fired. And as the German army continues to fight within these limits, one deeper question emerges, one that extends beyond individual battles. If air superiority determines when, where, and how ground combat occurs, was the outcome on the Western Front already decided long before the final advance began? By the autumn of 1944, the consequences of air superiority are no longer subtle. They are systematic. German movements on the Western Front have become predictable, not because of poor planning, but because the range of viable choices has collapsed. There are only so many roads that offer cover, only so many hours of darkness, only so many routes that avoid exposure. And Allied air power is watching all of them. You can almost feel how this predictability tightens like a net. Once German units adapt to avoid air attack, their patterns stabilize. Night movements follow familiar paths. Supply convoys reuse the same sheltered roads. Reserves gather in the same wooded areas. What keeps them alive also gives them away. Allied reconnaissance begins to anticipate rather than react. Patrol aircraft do not search randomly. They monitor known routes. They wait over likely assembly areas. They observe without striking, letting information accumulate. When attacks come, they are informed. This does not always result in destruction from the air. Often, it results in something quieter and more damaging. Delay. A bridge is hit just enough to slow traffic. A road is cratered, forcing reroutes. A convoy is scattered, not annihilated. The goal is not immediate annihilation. It is paralysis. You can almost see how this undermines German operations at every level. A battalion arrives hours late. An artillery unit fails to reach firing positions in time. A counterattack loses coordination before it begins. Each failure seems small. Together, they are decisive. Allied ground commanders learn to exploit this. They press German lines knowing reinforcements will struggle to arrive. They take calculated risks, confident that the enemy's response will be slow and fragmented. German commanders, by contrast, grow increasingly cautious. Plans are designed around what can move safely, not what is tactically ideal. Initiative narrows, ambition fades. The battlefield begins to tilt. You can almost feel how exhausting this is for the defending forces. Fighting is no longer about seizing opportunity, It is about managing exposure. Every decision carries the question, will this draw attention from above? Eventually, that question becomes paralyzing. Air superiority has achieved its most powerful effect, not by destroying armies, but by shaping behavior until defeat becomes the natural outcome. By late 1944, the Western Front reflects this reality. German forces still resist fiercely in places, but they cannot surprise, concentrate, or recover quickly. Allied forces advance steadily, adjusting pace as needed, confident that the enemy's freedom of action is permanently constrained. The sky has done its work. Not with a single decisive blow, but with relentless pressure that turns adaptability into predictability and predictability into defeat. As winter approaches and the front continues to move east, one final question remains to be answered. If air power never fought the decisive battle, how did it end up deciding the war? By the time winter settles over the Western Front, the pattern is complete. There is no single moment when air superiority announces its victory. No final aerial battle that ends the campaign. No dramatic collapse caused solely by bombs or strafing runs. Instead, the outcome is sealed quietly. You can almost feel how anticlimactic it is. German forces still fight. They still defend villages, rivers, and ridgelines. In close combat, they remain dangerous. In prepared positions, they can still inflict losses. But they are no longer free. Every operation they attempt begins already compromised. Movement must be concealed. Timing must align with darkness or weather. Reinforcement depends on routes the enemy already watches. Air superiority has turned war into a problem of inevitability. Allied forces, by contrast, operate with growing confidence. They do not rush blindly. They advance knowing that the enemy's ability to respond is limited, delayed, and exposed. This changes everything. A breakthrough no longer requires perfect coordination. A pause no longer risks disaster. If momentum slows, it can be restored. If resistance stiffens, it can be bypassed or worn down. The enemy cannot reposition fast enough to exploit opportunity. You can almost see how this transforms command decisions. Allied planners accept friction without fear. German planners fear exposure even when conditions seem favorable. This asymmetry does not need constant reinforcement from the air. It sustains itself. By late 1944, German commanders understand that air power has altered the war permanently. Even attempts at surprise-like concentrated offensives must operate within narrow windows under strict conditions against an enemy who can observe and respond. Success becomes temporary. Recovery becomes impossible. Air superiority has not destroyed the German army. It has denied it the future. That is the decisive effect. On the Western Front, wars are not won only by firepower or numbers. They are won by control over time, space, and decision-making. Allied air power achieved all three. It made German movement visible. It made German planning predictable. It made German recovery unlikely, and it did so without needing to fight every battle itself. The sky reshaped the ground war below it. By the time Allied forces cross into Germany, the outcome is no longer in doubt. What remains is execution, not uncertainty. Progress may be slow or fast, costly or cautious, but it is no longer reversible. Air superiority has already done its work. Quietly, relentlessly, decisively.